Here we go. So why would you make a capital budget and program? So planning is helpful. This process, the process of making a capital budget and program, makes your town develop a better picture of what it will need in the future, when and how much it will probably cost to get whatever you want. So there we go. This information allows you to better plan for these expenses and ensure that you can actually get what you need when you need it. So if you need a fire truck in 10 years and you don't plan for it, it's going to be an awful lot harder to get that fire truck in those 10 years than if you had planned for it in the beginning. So this is why it's useful. Budgeting also allows for the creation of reserve funds and other methods to keep your taxes roughly stable, which just makes people happier. You don't want your taxes to spike, and you don't want to pay more for something that you're going to need later when you can pay less. Planning for major purchases and repairs, it ensures thoughtfulness and preparedness, as well as people get input into the decision. You know, your townspeople, your select board, your whoever's involved, your road crew, they're going to get more time to prepare and to make sure that they're getting what they want and what the town wants and needs to keep running. And then planning for services helps preserve the services for the community in the future. Oh, and if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I don't know that I'll see them immediately, but I will try and get to the chat, especially at the end, or I might be able to see if you raise your hand. But my audience view has disappeared. So it would be great if you could either jump in, chime in real quick if you just need to say something, or save it till the end, write it down, put it in an email to me, and there will be plenty of time for questions at the end. Okay. So what is a capital budget and what's a capital program? These are different things. So Title 24, Section 4430 says that capital budgets shall list and describe the capital projects to be undertaken during the coming fiscal year, the estimated cost and the proposed method of financing. And capital program says that the plan of capital projects proposed to be undertaken during each of the following 5 or more years, the estimated cost and the proposed method of financing. So you can see they're very similar. The capital budget is for 1 year and the capital program is for 5 or more. Towns typically do, 5, 8, 10 years, some do 20, but once you get out that far, it's pretty hard to just kind of know what's coming up rather than the cost of it, just because that can vary so much, but you can always try and estimate. So both shall be arranged to indicate the order of priority for each capital project, to state for each project all of the following, which is a big paragraph. So a description of the project and the estimated total cost, which we said already, the proposed method of financing, which has all of these other, bits and pieces to make up that. So the amount proposed to be financed by, different funds like direct budgetary appropriation or a reserve fund, any from state or federal government, or any that's proposed to be financed by impact fees or obligations, and then showing the type of obligations together with a period of probable usefulness for which they're proposed to be issued. And finally, an estimate of the effect, if any, on operating costs of the municipality. So there's kind of a lot there, but especially, this region, it's a lot of small towns and your finances don't typically get to be super complicated, just because, especially if you're using a reserve fund, you kind of know, or a capital budget, when you're talking about getting those items, you have this discussion naturally anyway. So it might seem like a lot, it's a really big paragraph, but it's not. that big of a lift. Unless you want it to be. If you want it to be really hard, you can certainly make it pretty difficult and pretty time consuming and kind of nerve wracking, because you're talking about big sums of money sometimes. And then the Planning Commission may submit recommendations annually about the capital budget and program to the select board or other legislative, the municipal legislative branch. So the capital budget and program and the town plan. The capital budget and program builds on the plan. So the town plan, if you have a town plan, it must contain a utilities and facilities element. And if a town plan has a utilities and facilities element, then you can have a capital budget and program. As we said already, the capital budget is for 1 year. The program is for 5 or more years. The capital budget and program are both developed by the Planning Commission and adopted by the Select Board. And then the town plan is developed, by the public, by the Planning Commission, by hopefully everybody who wants a voice in that plan, and it's adopted by the Select Board after public hearings. So they're different. They're different monsters, the capital budget and program and the town plan, but they are very, very related. So we've talked a lot about capital projects. What are capital projects? So Title 24, Section 4430 says that a capital project is any one or more of the following, including a physical betterment or improvement, furnishings, machinery, apparatus, or equipment for the physical betterment or improvement when first constructed or acquired. Any preliminary studies and surveys relating to a physical betterment or improvement, land or rights in land, any combination. So that's legalese kind of, or statute-ese for many things. Capital projects can be many things, and we'll get into that a little bit later too, but buildings, big purchases, generally over $5,000, things that aren't maintenance. So if it costs a lot to put new tires on your fire truck, or to, fix the engine, that's not probably necessarily a capital project, but if you're getting a new fire truck, that is definitely a capital project. So how do we start this? So you start simple. Do it on a slow year. Start with a slow year for your Planning Commission, and you don't have to do it all at once, or you can, talk to, you can band together and really push it the first year, get everything you need, and then, each year after that, it's going to be easier to continue adding things, especially as you have that experience under your belt. As I said earlier, don't sweat the small stuff. Under $5,000 generally isn't capital budget and program worthy. It depends on the town though. If that's a big amount for you, you can include it. Yeah, is there a question? No? Okay. Again, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt me, or if there's a question in the chat that I don't see. Actually, let me see if I can figure out how to get into the chat again. Oh, okay, they are. There we go. Center of the screen. I don't know how to click off the recording alert, if that's still happening. Is there still something on the center of the screen somewhere?
No, it was my oops. Sorry, it's done.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
No, it works fine now. It was
Okay.
on my screen. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No worries. Glad I asked. So start on a slow year, add a few things each year. There's a big push that first year to get everything on that needs to be on. But it's really going to depend on your capacity, especially if you're doing this alone and without, you know, a planning, an RPC, a regional planning commission, or another consultant, or somebody with a lot of time on their hands, because it can take a lot of wrangling to get all the information from all the departments. So that's kind of step number 2, is delegate. Unless you have someone who's very dedicated and wants to take this on, you're going to have to really get people to help you help the town. So involve the relevant departments, whoever's knowledgeable. So if you've got a great road foreman, I'll show you in just a second how to really get them involved and have them do, you know, a lot of the work for you, but still make it, you know, as easy as this process can be. And then auditors and budget committees can help, and then make sure that you fund it or have an idea of how to fund it at least. So cash basis from annual appropriations, for example, or reserve accounts, which would help levelize the costs. So when I say delegate, this is kind of what I mean. This is an example survey sheet from, well, an unknown town. It was taken from a town, but removed the information. You can see it has all of these questions. This is just in Excel, but you could also make a fillable PDF of the information, although that might be a little harder because the cells won't automatically expand, or you can do Google Forms. If you feel like setting that up, there are a lot of ways to collect this information. You can see a lot of these are just yes, no questions. So do you have a garage? Yes. When was it built? Is there a V-Trans garage? No. How is your salt stored, covered and heated? You know, it's a pretty short answer. It's a pretty low lift for a lot of towns, depending on your capacity, but it can also be a kind of heavy lift if you have a lot of, you know, CIP or not CIP, capital budget worthy projects coming up. So again, it's going to depend on your capacity, but hopefully the survey sheet would help make it a little bit less of a crazy, all-encompassing, you know, time suck, because it's really a worthwhile cause to try and get this done, because it can be very, very valuable to see what's coming up cost-wise rather than kind of going in blind as a town, when obviously the department heads or your, you know, whoever's in charge of your road crew, they're going to know what big expenses are coming up and roughly when. So this is the example survey sheet. It'll come up again later. And then if anyone wants it, you know, shoot me an email and I'll see what I can get you template wise. So we're hopping to the town plan real quick. We already discussed they're pretty interrelated. So this is Title 24, Section 4382A4. The plan for a municipality shall include the following. This is everything that your municipal plan, utility and facility section needs. So a map, a statement of present and prospective community facilities and public utilities, showing all of these things, recommendations to meet future needs for these facilities and services, and indications of priority of need, costs, and a method of financing. It's pretty similar, as we've said, to what goes into your capital budget, which is super convenient. And that is what I wanted. All right. So map, what do you include? So you include your current and proposed utilities, buildings, sites, and facilities. Here are some examples: transmission lines, water wells, wastewater for utilities, buildings, so school buildings, offices, libraries, public libraries, places of worship, educational sites, facilities, etc. This is usually done within the boundaries of the town, but could also include regional resources such as the nearest hospital, the nearest airport, the regional high school that, you know, your kids get sent to if you don't have one in town. all that good stuff. So what do you write in your utilities and facilities section? You make a list of the present and prospective buildings, sites, facilities, utilities, vehicles and equipment, which isn't necessary per the statute, but it's great to have in there because those can be enormous purchases. Those can cost sometimes as much as building a new building. What services you have, and not only the things that you have, the things that you need. Because if you write it down, it's more likely to happen because it'll get people thinking about it and you can start planning for it. And then recommendations to meet future need and an indication of priority, cost, method of financing. So that's a couple slides on the town plan, utilities and facilities section. So how does that connect to the example sheet that I showed earlier? Really well, actually. So when you're writing your town plan, if you've got this example survey sheet that we went over before, you can actually take a lot of that information and plug it directly into your town plan. So you can see all these arrows pointing to the letters or the text. Does your town have a garage? Yes, the town garage, it was built in 1973. It has several heated bays, its own sewer and water. And again, these survey sheets can be filled out by different people and made into text for the capital budget and program or the town plan. It's just it can be a really great resource, especially if people are thorough and you can show them the value of the time and energy that it takes to fill it out. I worked at a town for my last job, and one of my tasks was to hound people for their survey sheets back. So I really had to get on the assistant road foreman because he wasn't filling out his sheets correctly, which was kind of annoying for both of us. So really, like, it's very, very valuable when it's done, but man, it's a little annoying. But again, like, it's just so useful when it's done, especially after that first year, when you're just adding a couple a year rather than going through the whole process. It's great. So again, with the utilities and facilities section, Title 24, Section 4382, you have to indicate the priority, the cost, and the method of financing of all of those things that we went through earlier. So show me the money. Costs. Show me the costs. What do we think it's going to cost in 5 years or next year? It doesn't have to be exact. You don't need to go to John Deere and get an exact quote for your mower or something for when it's 10 years out. That quote's gonna not be valid anymore next year. So it doesn't have to be exact. You can decide to use like an inflation rate of 4% per year. And then plan up based on that. You might come up a little over, a little under. Either way, the planning is going to be worth it because you're going to know what that cost is and hopefully have the money to actually purchase the thing. Is money necessary? Can you do it with volunteers or donations? So going back to this slide, it says at the bottom, you should consider constructing a small structure for resident sand. Can this be done as a volunteer project, as it says down here? Could the materials be donated? You don't know until you ask, especially for a smaller structure. Maybe you're not going to get a fire truck donated, but if it's just, a weekend project to construct a small stand shed, why not ask? Why not try and gather volunteers and donations for it? And then what kind of money are you going to use if you are using money? So are you going to use grants, taxes, bonds, reserves? And then time frame, by when, by what year, especially with vehicles, when's its useful life up? When's the maintenance gonna be worth, when's your maintenance cost gonna outweigh keeping the vehicle in the fleet? If it's breaking down every summer and it costs $1,000 to fix it, is it gonna be cheaper in the long run to cut that loss and get a new one? So who does this? Who makes the capital budget and program? Or the town plan, utilities and facilities section? We do. All of us, or most of us. I don't know what your roles are, and I don't know if anyone new showed up into the presentation, but we do it. So we already went over the planning commission and select board roles a little bit. This is from Title 24, Section 4325 and 4443. So any planning commission created under this chapter may prepare and present a recommended capital budget and program for a period of 5 years or more, as set forth in Section 4440 of this title, for action by the legislative body, usually a select board, as set forth under 4443 of the title. So the planning commission assists the select board by, recommending a capital budget and program. But that includes consolidating all the budgets, getting all the information, reviewing and discussing the needs of each department, its work plans, its goals, what it sees coming, and then delivering to the select board or town manager a draft of that capital budget or program for its consideration. And then the select board's role is adoption, amendment, or repeal of capital budget and program. So notwithstanding any other provision of this chapter, a capital budget and program may be adopted, amended, or repealed by the legislative body of a municipality following one or more public hearings upon public notice, if a utilities and facilities plan as described has been adopted by the legislative body. So several public hearings, you gotta have the transparency. It says at least one, more is better. This is really important. And then obviously the select board has the final say. So it's the planning commission's baby for a while, but then the select board takes over. So reserve funds, Title 24, 2804A. Mention them a couple times. I want to make sure that we all know what they are and that we're on the same page. So at an annual or special meeting duly warned, a municipality may establish a reserve fund to be under the control and direction of the legislative branch of the municipality. The reserve fund shall be kept in a separate account and invested like other public funds, and may be expended for the purposes for which it was established, or when authorized by a majority of the voters present and voting at an annual or special meeting which was duly warned for other purposes. So basically, it's kind of like the funds you've already got, but it can only be used for the purposes it was established for. So it's not, just taking money out of your general fund and, calling it a reserve fund. This is a real separate fund. So if you don't have one, it's great to get one. And how you adopt a reserve fund will depend on how your town votes. So on the floor versus Australian ballot. And then the Vermont League of Cities and Towns has a short model reserve fund policy with guidance. When I send out when it's on the website, on Two Rivers website, this is a link that'll take you to it, or you can Google VLCT, Vermont League of Cities and Towns Model Reserve Fund Policy, and it's going to be the first Google result. Great little document. I think it's like 4 pages. And it explains, how to adopt a reserve fund based on how your town votes. I don't have that memorized yet, but I'm working on it. It also has specific sample language, which is also great. really just takes a little bit of the work of making this reserve fund off of, your town staff. So an example of why it's great to plan for capital budget and capital project, capital program projects. There we go. So I've used the example of a fire truck a couple times. We're going to say, your town needs it in 10 years. At today's price, that new truck would cost, let's say $315,000. That's a lot. So if you divide the cost over 10 years, it's $31,500 a year, and it'll get you there. Easy. If that's what you can do, great. But do we think that cost is going to increase? Do we think that fire truck will cost more in 10 years than it does now? Probably, right? That's just how things are going. That's how they've kind of always gone. Costs increase. So part of this planning process is to say, do we want to use this number here, or do we want to factor in some inflation? So I've got an example here of a 4% inflation rate to the cost. Again, so this isn't a 4% inflation rate necessarily for this, but for the cost of that fire truck. So if you needed to buy it in, 5 years, maybe it would cost this much, $383,246. But you keep going, cost's going to keep going up. But then you have a better idea, that's a pretty big jump. That's over $100,000 more. That cost might go up in 10 years. Which one do you want to plan for? Again, these are questions you're going to have to go through, with the relevant town officials or, voluntary bodies or select board when you're developing, if you develop a capital budget and program. So if you decide to factor in some inflation to the cost, then you have two choices. Well, at least two choices. You can use an equal amount, which is example number 1 right here, which is stable. So it's always going to be $44,834-ish, every year for 10 years. And then you get that nice big number here that matches the 4% inflation cost per year. Or you can do example 2 right here, which might be easier to fund if your tax base is growing, but which is a little harder to figure out. The math's a little bit more difficult than, 4% inflation and then divide it by 10, but you can do it and we can help. So this one, it starts at $40,000, just lower than this one, 41, 42, 43, 44, it's just going up by 2.51% per year until you get about to 50,000, which is higher, than that one, but still gets you to that same number. And if your tax base is growing, or maybe you don't have the capacity right now to go full force, $44,834 a year quite yet, but you think you'll get there, maybe option 2 is better. Or, if it's just easier to pass, more feasible for your town to pass, there's this option 2. So reserve funds. What could you have a reserve fund for? What capital budget items could you make a reserve fund for, or what themes? So road equipment, mowers, tractors, bigger purchases, graders, anything that's expensive that you're not going to want to fund just out of the general fund, or that you're going to have to plan for. So emergency services, fire engine, if you've got an ambulance, or, other emergency vehicles, emergency buildings, which goes into buildings or town hall, whatever municipal buildings you have that are going to need significant upkeep or renovation. You can make a reserve fund for buildings, recreational areas that are going to need significant inputs, trees and parks, vehicles, water and wastewater systems. These are all topics you could make a reserve fund for. And I'm sure there are more, but this is a pretty good broad overview. And then example reserve. So I think you can see that okay. It looks good on my screen, so hopefully it looks good for you. So this is a capital budget and program for highway equipment. It's with like a 5-year replacement. So they have like a replacement plan for their vehicles and other equipment. So you can see like with this 2013 Freightliner, you've got this column is the item, I guess, the vehicle, the year purchased, purchase price, years in service, and then replacement year. Got your timeline here. Of course, this is in the thousands, so this was not $191 for a Freightliner truck. So you can see they first wanted to replace it in 2012. You can see this is a little old, and then they replaced it again in 2017, and they replaced it again maybe this year if they're actually following this plan. And then down here at the bottom, you can see total purchases right here. That first row at the very bottom, the reserve account balance at the beginning of the year. So this group, this town does have a reserve fund for their highway equipment. If not, maybe their entire fleet of vehicles that they use for municipal purposes. So you can see the reserve fund balance varies depending on the amount that they spend. It even goes negative out here toward the end of this timeline, which was started in, again, 2012. When it goes negative, it's not necessarily that big of a deal because this is, again, a 10-year plan out. So hopefully you can figure things out when you get to this part. By either making more, they have a stable addition to the reserve account. So every year it is $185,000 that they're inputting into the reserve account. But as we discussed earlier, sometimes it might make sense instead of just doing, a stable balance. This is for one item, but they're using the same premise where, you estimate and then you make a stable input rather than, accounting for inflation. So maybe some costs went up where it started to draw down or would start to draw down on their funds. And then reserve account expenditure is just total purchases reiterated down here. And then the reserve account balance at the end of the year, or the estimated, reserve account balance at the end of the year, if they followed this table. So you can see they're in the positive. Then they hit negative a couple times, but again, it's pretty far out, or it was pretty far out. So it's not that big of a deal yet because you've got plenty of time. As long as you plan for it, you've got plenty of time to address those issues. So that's actually the end of my presentation. We went for about 40 minutes. So I'm looking at the chat. I can't see who's in the room or in the, the virtual room. But are there questions? Feel free to chime in vocally or to put your questions in the chat. If you don't feel comfortable putting your questions in the chat or, saying them right now, shoot me an email and I'll get back to you. Yeah. Anyone want to see a different slide again? All right, Jerry, I see that you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think a very simple question. Does the statute say anything about reserve funds actually physically existing in a separate account, like a separate bank account with its own number that a accountant could track, or can it be partitioned like in, you know, with software, with just so it's on paper within the town?
So it would need to be in a different, technically, it would need to be in a different account, not the same account, but partitioned, you know, with software or
Okay.
in your minds, because that happens sometimes too. That's what this is talking about, but you know, you got to start somewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Other hands? Other questions? I see a couple of you are unmuted. If you want to ask a question, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to raise my hand. This is Leanne.
Mhm.
So if we were to set up a contingency fund, or try to start budgeting for one for capital improvements that we see coming, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years
Mhm.
down the road, and we don't use those in that particular year of that budget, what's the process for rolling them forward so they, what do I want to say? They don't get lost. They're kept
Mhm.
separately. Do we have to put an article in the town meeting each year to continue to hold those funds so that it grows over time and they're ready and they're there when we want to use them?
So are you talking about like you have a reserve fund and you had some money allocated that you had put in for like a new truck or something? And then
Right.
you didn't end up buying that truck in, 2024?
Right.
Like yeah. As far as I know, it just rolls forward and you just keep pushing it back on your capital program. So if you didn't buy it in 2024, push it to 2026. Write it
Okay.
down, have the PC recommend that it be pushed to the next year that you think it's feasible to purchase it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Are we still thinking? Anybody want to see a different slide?
Okay, I'm gonna stick my hand up there again.
Okay.
We recently had a not very fun event at our town clerk office with a septic backup, and we had not set up any, oh yeah, it was not good. It's still not good, with no contingency funds for maintenance set up. So is that the type of thing, a line item that should be set up in a budget for, I guess this would be a capital improvement, because we don't know yet what we have to do to correct the issue. I mean, there's some maintenance that needs to be done, but we never set up a maintenance program for the town structures. So
Right.
would that be like a separate line item for contingency funds? We don't have anything set up for the town clerk office. We don't have anything set up for the, fire department or the garage. In terms of what we need. So would that fall under this guideline of a capital planning that might need to happen down the road, and have a separate line item for that?
That's a great question. I'm not exactly sure. To me, that's more maintenance with, needing to set up a contingency fund, which I'm not sure is necessarily, in the spirit of a capital budget and program, but I also know that they can be kind of flexible. It can, it's ultimately up to towns.
I guess the question is, what's the guideline? If it needs a new roof, is that capital planning? If it needs a new septic system, I don't know the line, the delineation there.
That's a great question. I do see where you're coming from. My response will be that I'm not sure because, you know, the
Neither
town
are
I,
we.
yeah, I know. The town I worked for last, if it was something that they had to hire out for, you know, like if they needed to bring in a ton of other, it was a town of 5,000 back in Iowa, where I'm from.
Mhm.
So things are a little different. They had a pretty good sized road crew. But if they needed to contract out and have another road crew, you know, a private company do something, then some of their road maintenance made its way into the capital budget and program, even though that's just maintenance, it's routine maintenance.
Yeah, but actually that can happen very easily.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, so
okay,
I
so
think
that's good to know.
it's kind of flexible, but I'll ask and see if, you know, Kevin has a specific, you know, best practices, and then I'll put it in a document that I put on the website,
Okay.
where this ends up. I've got your question down,
Great, thank you.
and I'll get back to you. Okay, so are there any questions on how you actually do this? Or, you know, what it looks like to do these first meetings, what it looks like to hound people for, you know, their survey responses? This is again something I did at in my last job, and then I've read up on a lot here, so I just want to make sure I'm not leaving anything, you know, you don't go away with any questions that you're like, darn, I should have asked her. All right. So as I said, I'm just gonna say it. As I said, it's a lot of emailing, it's a lot of talking to people, or, you know, meeting virtually and making sure that people get know how important this is, and then get their information to you. So I had that, you know, this document, the survey sheet, or however you gather information. And then using this survey sheet and saying, okay, you know, road foreman, or, you know, building maintenance person, what do we actually need and when do we need it by? And then you write it down. It's a big undertaking that first year, you know, as you get all the projects in, but it really is as simple as that. You just ask, you know, whoever knows what's going on, knows what's what. You ask them and they give you some answers, and you write it down and it goes in a document. And you do some math like we did here. Decide, you know, which approach you're taking. And if you're using a reserve fund, this might be what your capital budget looks like, or your capital program, I'm sorry, your capital program, because it goes out 10 years.
Mhm. So our planning commission is preparing a survey for the town plan, because we have to renew our town plan. This seems to me like it would be a good time to incorporate some of these questions into that survey, as long as we're going to survey the town. And we've already approved a fire truck, but we have other things that need to come, that are in the pike that need to be discussed.
Yeah, capital budgeting can really fit well into that. You can see, you know, if the town has concerns, or, you know, if you're
Mhm.
I don't know.
So you're gonna make this whole your
My presentation.
presentation, thank you, available. We invited our planning commission chair. He's on the road a lot, but it would be of value to him, I think, to be able to see these materials and say, maybe we need to add some of this to that survey before it goes out.
Yeah. So this is the last slide of the presentation. This is the site that it's going to be on. It'll be on
Perfect.
Two Rivers, so TRORC.org
Yep.
/planning-tools, and it'll be up there probably by Friday.
Okay.
And it's about halfway down the page here. You know, it's not super convenient just at the very top. You kind of got to scroll down, but I'll make sure it's really, you know, labeled that this was from this meeting. So this is what you're looking for.
Okay,
Uh,
that sounds good. Yeah, I know we reached out to him, but I think that would be a useful tool.
mhm.
As
I do
long
want to
as
say,
they're already building this survey.
yeah,
We don't want to hit
well,
people.
we're kind of losing you, Leanne.
Stuff.
Yeah, it can be really important. It's a great way to, Leanne, we kind of lost you there. Your audio quality wasn't great. So I don't know exactly what you said, but if you want to shoot me an email.
I'm sorry.
Okay. This survey sheet specifically does usually get sent out to, you know, department heads, rather than the general public. Just do you want to put that in the chat, Leanne, if you can? I'm not sure how easy it is to access the chat from your phone, but that might be a little better. It sounds like you don't have great reception right now. So again, this is, you know, department heads staying within your town. If you're doing a capital plan, or not capital plan, town plan update, can be a great place to see, you know, what infrastructure, what services your town needs, and then start planning for them. But you're not going to ask the general public, you know, all of these questions. Does your town have a garage? Like, yes or no. Maybe some people don't know you have a garage. it- so yeah. And Leanne, I'll talk to Kyle, and or you can, I'll let Kyle know that you attended this meeting, that we can talk more about that with Stockbridge, how to best involve people with the town plan. Okay. It's 7 minutes to 8. Are there any more questions? Any other points people want to get across? Any confusion? Yep. I see your message, Leanne.
Yep, just saying thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I'm so glad we had people show up. It's great. Again, here's my contact information. If you forget it, just go to the Two Rivers website, and then go to about, and then staff. And you'll find my contact information there too. Or just call, you know, if you can remember this phone number, if you've already got it in your phone, call that and leave a message somewhere, and I'll get to you eventually, whenever I'm told that you called. Again, the materials will be found at trorc.org/planning-tools within 3 days or so of the presentation, about halfway down the page. It'll be, you know, this presentation minus, you know, the first couple slides, and then maybe the slide. Since you found it on that page, you probably don't need directions again. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for taking time out of your evening. I know night meetings are kind of a drag sometimes, but hopefully this was at least useful. I'll hang out until everybody leaves. If anybody's got questions they want to ask, go ahead, but you're free. Have a good rest of your evenings, guys.
Thank you, Sydney.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you. You have a question, Michael?
I think I'm all set. Thank you.
All right. Yeah.